Thank you so much, Maria. It's nice to be here.
Okay, we are here with Nora Bateson. Nora is uh, Gregory Bateson's daughter, a very influential thinker around the science and between body and mind. And Nora produced an Ecology of Mind that is a very prestigious and very famous movie that talks about all these things. So thank you, Nora, for being with me today. It's a honor for me to be with you. And well, I would like you to explain the contents and the experience in itself doing this movie that is so famous and so beautiful.
Thank you, Maria. Well, I'll try to be brief, but because it was a long process, it took me so many years to finish that film. And one of the challenging and most informative processes for me around that film was to really work with it as a metalogue. Gregory, my father, liked to have communicational forms in which the form of the communication was in keeping with the messages of the communication. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's very much what's happening with that film. And I learned from producing and directing and writing that piece that so much of what my father's work was really about was around this question of how do we describe a living system? Okay, because part of that description, of course, is going to draw immediately from the frame, the epistemology of the observer. And in the case of that movie, I am the observer. I'm the one observing Gregory. So it's not really a movie about Gregory, it's a movie about Gregory being observed through me. And that, for me, was the most ethical and careful approach that I could make, so that I never gave the impression, or I tried not to, that this is who Gregory was, and to pinpoint him in a freeze frame, in a finite description of what he did and why it was important. I wanted his work and his ideas to stay alive and to stay in relationship and to stay in process. And so to do that, I had to be very careful how I laid out the film. Usually in biographical films, that's exactly what you learn, is who this person was and why they were important. And I was actually trying to make it more of a portrait, more of an introduction to the person that I knew in the way that I knew him, and the ideas that he generated, and that they don't stop. There are no finite answers to any of the questions that he was asking. But the process of description requires very careful consideration.
And why do you say very careful considerations? In which aspects, for example?
Well, because when I'm describing my father, okay, or when anyone is describing a complex living system of any sort, an ocean, a dog, a fish tank, an organization, the complexity of the processes and the contexts that are in play that description needs to be held with extreme care. Otherwise, what you get is a freeze frame. You get only a partial reductionistic description.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if one starts with the idea that you can be objective.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, there's no way that I could be objective about anything, really, but let alone my father. So it was sort of the ultimate test of having that, the kind of the representational responsibility to hold open my version of who he was so that it could never be reduced.
Mm-hmm.
So to hold it in a sort of a poetry allows there to be multiple interpretations. And to hold it as an objective, definitive description closes down those interpretations.
Mm-hmm. And when you have to choose the title of the movie, which is what did you want to underline? I understand that his vision, but what do you mean with ecology of mind for all the people that doesn't know him or his theories in a short, um, in general terms?
Okay, quickly to say, an ecology of mind is I borrowed that obviously from his book, which is entitled Steps to an Ecology of Mind. And the notion of an ecology of mind is the notion that there are patterns in complex living systems that are in interdependencies and interrelationships, like a jungle or an ocean. Okay, that we have these kind of ecologies in life. And that those same principles can be placed upon our ideas, that our ideas are also interdependent, that they're also in forms of, relationships. And how are they relating? Are there some of those ideas that are flourishing? Are some composting? Are some evolving, dying? So the notion of an ecology of mind is a coming together of Gregory's idea of mind as a larger principle, that it's much larger than the brain in your head. It's the whole process by which this interaction and interdependency of life is taking place, and how our ideas are part of that. So what world are you seeing? What is the frame through which we make sense of the world we live in? What is the ecology of ideas that form that frame?
And he worked a lot with mass communication and interpreting, seeing the contradiction between what some media communicate and some others contradict that communication, isn't it?
What's the question?
He saw he analyzed the contradiction of mass media in the ecology of mind, for example, or the impact of media communication in the
Oh,
ecology
I
of mind.
see. Yeah. Yes, well, of course. I mean, what are the things that form the ecology of our thoughts? I mean, if we step back and we think about that for a moment, what's in your head? What's in your frame? How do you make sense of this world? And part of that is language, it's culture, it's education, it's experience, it's sometimes there's genetic things that have information around that. There's certainly biological, the microbiome and the whole process in which that's in interaction. But also, of course, mass media and and so many things that are outside of our reach and description. I don't want to make a list and pretend that we know what's on that list, because there's a great deal of connectivity that takes place that we don't have any words for. We don't have any conscious, aware, verbal, direct way of dealing with.
And you developed a written essay or in your blog, or you wrote about warm data. And I saw that it can be applied to eating disorders, for example, or treating with that kind of issues. And I would like, if you were so kind, to develop this work that you have done. If is what does warm data means in this context?
Yeah. Well, warm data has been a wonderful exploration for me. And I'm looking forward to it. And I want to say from the beginning, my hope is that this is only the beginning, that we have another interview in 2 years and we have much more to say. But the idea is that we are living in a moment where we're dealing with complex problems, complex issues. Not all problems. Some of them are really complex, beautiful things too. But regardless, one of the things we're having difficulty doing is forming inquiry and research around complexity. And the reason is that the way research has been developed is that you pull things out of context and study them in their detail, which is great. It's just that our culture doesn't put them back. And if you want to understand complexity, you need to be able to study things within their contexts, not just one context, but multiple contextual relational fields. And the second you do that, we have to totally rethink what we mean by data or information. Because that kind of information doesn't behave in the same way that data has behaved in the past. In the 1600s, we developed a scientific methodology, and some of the most important aspects of that were objectivity, were the ability to quantify or measure, were the ability to have an outcome that repeats, okay, those sorts of things. But when you're dealing with complexity, there's no way to have objectivity. It won't serve you in the least. And there's no way to measure it because it changes. And because it's changing, there's no way to have the science experiments repeat themselves. You know, if I ask you tomorrow what you thought about this interview today, and I ask you again the next day, guess what? You're not going to say the same things. So we have a kind of predicament of needing to create a new species of information, a whole new way of thinking about what information is. And I am not suggesting that we do this to replace quantified information, but to have it in complement, to have it alongside quantified information. We need both. But right now, we don't have any authorization or credibility for dealing with relational things that move around. And so we get into causation and linear solutions, and the tools that get developed to deal with very complex problems are totally linear and disrupt the complexity. So I would say that many of the problems that we have in the world today as individuals and as societies are actually the result of previous solutions. because those solutions weren't really able to deal with the complexity. So warm data is that. Warm data is information about the transcontextual interdependencies of a complex system. How do we get at that? And the properties of it have been really fun to develop. It's felt to me just a little bit radical and rebellious and just like pure oxygen, like I could finally breathe. You know, that we can have information in which paradox is the information. Contradictions are important, okay? We shouldn't come to those contradictions and think, well, this is going to blow our data set. The contradictions are the data set. Because when you're dealing in complexity, of course there's going to be contradictions. They tell you about the relationships, right? Where we can say the aesthetic of the information, the aesthetic of the interaction is information. How is this system feeling, toning, mooding, attituding? What is the feel of this system? Because it matters. That is information. So those are a couple of the criteria for warm data that I am particularly excited about because they're so different. But then, of course, there's other stuff that's more predictable. It's about holism and reductionism together. It's about having multiple description. It's about finding patterns and seeing connectivity in those patterns. So it's really exciting. It's really, really exciting. And so with the Bateson Institute, we've been sort of developing process around it. Okay, so first of all, what is warm data? Second of all, how do you get it? What's the methodology for getting this warm data stuff? Okay, then how do you express it? I mean, clearly it's not going to come in a data report with graphs and numbers. So what does warm data look like? And then once you have it and you know what it looks like, what do you do with it?
That's it, yes.
Right? And so this is why I'm saying that we're at the beginning and it's so exciting. And where this goes and how we move through it is something that I am so thrilled to be a part of right now. Yeah.
I imagine, and I think that this must be applied in psychotherapy or this kind of environments that need some kind of healing or solving problems like eating disorders, for example. And when you talk, it made me remember some other methodologies. I was wondering myself, which are the methodologies of warm data?
Yeah.
But
Okay, well, are
yeah,
you familiar with the double bind theory?
yeah,
Okay, so just in case someone who's watching this isn't. So the double bind theory is a theory that was, the credit goes to it being developed by my father and his colleagues at the Mental Research Institute. And it was originally developed as a theory of schizophrenia. There are some other possibilities that are starting to emerge through our archival research, but because it may be that the double bind came out much earlier and came out in relationship to art and culture. So that's interesting, but that's not our topic. So the double bind is the idea that you can get in a problem that you can't solve at more than one level. Okay, so the eating disorder example is a great example. The person can feel like that if they eat, they're going to violate the control that they are trying to have over what their situation. And if they do eat, if they don't eat, they're going to upset their family. Okay, so they can't eat and they can't not eat, and they get caught in a double bind. Should I take something out of the refrigerator and then I have to throw up and I have to, deal with whatever this process is that I have to deal with the eating disorder? Or should I just not eat, but then that will make my family upset. So either way, they get caught. And so in this sense, and additionally, the person can't really discuss the double bind that they're in. That's another piece of it. So it's actually a triple bind, but it always got called a double bind. I don't know why that is, but it's a triple. And so warm data comes along as a let's don't use the word methodology, okay? Let's use the word approach, or let's talk about the way that we're working. Instead of turning it into a technique or some sort of, outlineable process, because, when you deal with complex systems, you have to be ready to respond to the system. And the idea of a methodology counter indicates the ability to respond to whatever needs to be responded to. So let's talk about approach instead of methodology. So the approach would be to think about the contexts in which that person has become stuck. All right, where are the binds there? Okay, like we were just outlining. Now, what happens when we, in filmic terms, when we zoom out a little more and we start to ask, what other contextual processes are happening here? Besides the ones we've outlined, what other contexts are involved? You mentioned media, economy, education, gender, religion. Okay, what happens when we start to open up these other contexts and see how this person is in relation to those other contexts and how this double bind is being held inside multiple contexts, not just the ones we've at first identified as being in a stabilized stuckness.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do that, one of the things that happens is that possibilities emerge. New stories start to come out. It's really unpredictable what you will find. And that's good. That's very, very good. And it's one of the reasons I'm saying be careful with the word methodology. Because you don't then turn to context number 4 and pull out item number 3. The process is about looking at the relational aesthetic. What are the contradictions? What are the patterns? What are the multiple descriptions of these things? How are they coming together to form this stuckness? And what previously unseen possibilities are there to find a way out, to relearn? Instead of saying, what's wrong with this person and how can we fix her? It's a way of saying, how is this person making sense of their world? How are they learning to be in the situation that they're in? And how might they learn to be in that situation in another way? To look at that as a process of learning. That's another piece of work we've been doing. But anyway, that's a little example. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, because that's an issue that is we are interested in, that has to be with human rights, that has to be more in developing countries like Argentina, and we are top in that disease in the world.
Yeah.
And we have the best doctors here and psychiatrists. I don't know how to say, and psychologists. But it's a very interesting issue. We have an NGO working for that. That is Anybody. That is in UK. I don't know if you know Susie Orbach. She's a feminist. She has been working in UK in mental health institute for women, and yes, this is a very complex issue, and I think that your developments in warm data should be known by mm, this environment, this scientific environment that works with this issue to help a lot of women, uh, because women are the most affected human beings with this, and it's not a chance. It's not something that um, is randomly uh, uh, given. It's something that has several causes, if you want to say causes.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when you get into these things that are taking place in complex systems, that the causation is multi-contextual. It's not even just multiple, it's multi-contextual. And so I mean, you know, we could start by looking at food. How would we even describe what is food, right? What is food? Is it culture? Is it agriculture? Is it economy? Is it media? Is it politics? Is it medicine? Is it family? Is it history? What is food? And then, you know, in relation to food, who am I? Am I daughter, mother? Am I biology? Am I microbiome? Am I the politics of my gender? Where am I in that?
Yes, it's very, it has a lot to do with identity, with the identity construction,
Yeah,
and how we build an identity in all these complex systems.
right.
So, how can people from Argentine um, arrive or be in contact with the institute and all this research and developments? Because your work is amazing, but here maybe some uh, fashion models are more known than these amazing things that you are doing. So the idea is to let
Yeah.
everybody know the importance of your work.
Well, the Bateson Institute, the International Bateson Institute, has been, like I said, we've been in the process of developing this for a few years. And so there haven't been publications yet, but we're about to publish. And once we do that, it'll be a lot easier for people to, you know, kind of know what we're up to. But until then, if people would like to be in touch, they can contact through bateson.institute@gmail.com.
Okay.
And otherwise, I would say let's do something in Argentina. I have to tell you, I love Argentina. It's one of my favorite places in the whole wide world. You see this painting?
Yes, I was seeing it while you were talking. I was seeing it, and yes, it called my attention a lot.
And that is of Buenos Aires.
Oh, that's why. That's
Yeah,
warm. That's warm data in our
that's one
interview.
day.
You know,
That's right.
because you were talking, and I was seeing I was paying
The
attention,
corner of the
obviously, but
painting.
I was seeing the. I can't
Just
believe
the
it.
corner.
Ah, that's
But
why. So
yeah, so
you've
and
been in.
I
You've been.
got it in Buenos Aires, yeah, and I bought it at a remate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very beautiful to for our interview because yes, it's something that has to be with what we are talking about.
That's
Uh,
right. It's in the
because
connection.
where you were talking, I was seeing that, and I didn't understand why, and that used to happen to me a lot. I think that the most sensitive people used to have these experiences. In my case, I'm a very sensitive person. So, um, yes. So you are thinking about getting to know here letting us know the Bateson Institute. Are you thinking about visiting Argentine in the next
I would
years
love
or
to do
months?
that. Have to set something up and figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense, because things keep getting set up down there and they keep on not working out. So one of these days it's going to get set up and it's going to actually work out. So
Yes, and
okay.
we in Agenda RC are in contact uh, f- mm, with a lot of important people that works with for example, festivals. Like we have the Anima Film Fest and the Green Film Fest. And in Anima Film Fest that we are promoting right now, there are movies that are like the Ecology of Mind that should be known here. Um, for example, they are promoting Teach and Han Walk With Me movie. I don't know if you know it. So maybe we can work together to make your work and your father's work also, obviously, but your work for the most important thing, and your development, for example, your books. I know I know that you have written some books. That's something that it's very interesting for me also. uh, if you want to talk about a little bit about
Well, I
your
think
last
it would
produce.
be, yeah, it would be great to get a Spanish um, translation of Small Arcs, because I think it would really fit with the Argentine sensibility, because it's definitely really personal, but it's also political and it's also scientific, and it's about love and it's about identity and it's about the body and it's about raising children and it's about being a woman and it's about sex and it's about ecology and it's about war and it's about, sort of looking at all the things we do in life through the lens of the system's um, way of seeing. And how does that look in interaction with our children, or how does that look in the way that we think about who we are? So it's a very uh, it's a very multi-layered, many-voiced book. The thing I like to say about it is that my feeling is that it takes complexity to perceive complexity. And so if you're willing to begin to perceive complexity with all these different versions of yourself, then you'll be able to really perceive it. But if you need for it to be just something that exists in books or in organizations that you happen to be doing consulting with, you're not going to get it. It takes more than your professional self. It takes your whole being.
That's it. Well, we are very famous here as practitioners
Yeah,
because we don't have the resources or so much time to just research as more developed countries like US or Europe. But we are admired as practitioners, especially in psychology field.
mm-hmm.
So I think it would be we should complement or yes each other's resources like practitioners and scientists to make this a better world, because in this interrelation you can sum more than the parts separated. So
Yeah,
and I think that technology helps us to do this. Communication in this sense is very important. The advance of internet and communication is very important to for development in this sense, I think.
yeah,
So
me too.
well,
And it's just takes time of just conversations that feel different.
yes.
And it's just really important that we do this. that we have conversations where we address things that are possible, and we address them in entirely new ways. And so this is what our work is now. We got to do this.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much, Nora, for your time today. I think that we have a brief of all the work, the important work that you're doing with the institute, and we are looking forward to have you here. So, a Generacy promotes leaders around the world, and uh, we love our work. We are waiting you here with our open arms. So,
Well, I'll
thank,
be there as soon as we get it together. So I
yeah,
look forward to that very, very much. Thank you.
no, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice day, Nora.
You too.